I was 13 when I first noticed the nagging urge to wash my hands after I touched doorknobs, my locker, a pencil I picked up off the ground. When my parents, my teachers, and my peers would ask what I was trying to wash off my hands, I couldn't tell them. They weren't actually dirty. You couldn't see anything on them, but they felt dirty, and this resulted in hand washing with scalding hot water, soap, and washing all the way up to my elbows. What started as a small problem spiraled out of control very quickly. I spent hours washing my hands and perfecting routines that prevented my belongings and myself from becoming contaminated. I couldn't sit on any of the furniture in my parents' house. I had one spot I could sit at our dining room table, and if anyone else sat there, I had to disinfect it with Clorox wipes. No one could touch me. My parents couldn't hug me. My nightly shower routine took anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. Getting into bed without showering was not an option. Being in public was impossible. There was too great a risk that I would become contaminated. And if I did, coming home and washing everything I was wearing and showering sometimes didn't even help. I was still contaminated, and the stress associated with this was nothing I, nor my family, had ever experienced. My family tried so hard to understand what was going on. After consulting with a therapist in town, my family discovered that I had obsessive-compulsive disorder, and we all began attending therapy to learn how to live with my ever-present symptoms. The therapist put me on a medication to help stop the compulsions I was having. From here, my symptoms were manageable, but I was certainly not symptom-free. I constantly had the urge to wash my hands and my clothes and to complete the routines that my mind was always urging me to follow through with. I continued weekly therapy and Telluride until we decided it wasn't really working anymore. We tried several other therapists in the area, at one point driving 2 hours, one way, once a week to see a woman who was a somewhat reputable child psychologist. I was ultimately able to get a pretty good grasp on my symptoms. My junior year of college, I thought my OCD was gone, and I took myself off my medication. When I moved back to Telluride post-college, the wheels fell off. I discovered that my OCD was not gone, and that it had manifested itself in another way. I convinced myself I had HIV, although I hadn't come in contact with it, nor had I participated in any activities where I could have potentially contracted it. I was in the Telluride Medical Center once a month for a 6-month stint getting tested. At this point, I returned to therapy and got back on my medication. My therapist informed me that I will probably always either be on medication or in therapy, and that OCD isn't something that just goes away. It's something that I will always have to manage in my life, and that it was a good idea for me to build up my toolbox and figure out ways to cope. I started seeing another therapist who was trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, and we began building up this toolbox. We did many working sessions where I was forced to confront something that I thought was contaminated. I had to touch it, and then sit and use my toolbox of relaxation techniques to calm myself down until I was able to move on with my day without washing my hands or changing my clothes. There isn't a day that goes by where I don't have an obsessive-compulsive thought. I have to talk myself out of a lot of actions that I know are just the OCD, things that I know are unrealistic. Perseverance, seeking and receiving help from others, and education on obsessive-compulsive disorder are just a few of the reasons I am alive and able to function at such a high level. Not everyone is so fortunate, but I believe talking about OCD and what it truly means for people who suffer from it helps. It opens the conversation and allows for those with it to know they're not alone. There is power in numbers, and I share my story in the hope of letting others who are suffering know that they are not alone, and that you can get a handle on your symptoms and be a real person again.